So you think Mrs. Puff is just a sweet old driving instructor, right? Wrong. This lady might be the biggest criminal in Bikini Bottom. If real-world laws applied to her, she wouldn't just be in trouble. She'd be serving a sentence longer than SpongeBob has been trying to get his license. From reckless endangerment to full-on attempted murder, bribery, identity fraud, and even escaping prison. This woman is basically an underwater mafia boss. And today, we're breaking it all down, calculating exactly how many years she would be spending behind bars. Trust me, by the end of this video, you're gonna be shocked at just how many crimes she's committed. First up, reckless endangerment. And let's be real, this is Mrs. Puff's biggest crime. As a driving instructor, she has one job, to make sure her students are safe. But what does she do instead? She willingly lets SpongeBob get behind the wheel, even though she knows he's an absolute disaster. In almost every episode where he drives, he causes total destruction. We're talking boats crashing into buildings, explosions, and sometimes the entire city gets wrecked. And you're telling me this is normal for a teacher? Now, in the real world, this would be considered reckless endangerment, which is a serious felony. Let's do some math. If Mrs. Puff was charged for just 20 of SpongeBob's major accidents, with each one carrying up to 5 years in prison, that would already put her at 100 years behind bars. And we're just getting started, so this next crime is actually insane. Did Mrs. Puff actually try to murder SpongeBob? Let's talk about Demolition Doofus. In this episode, she literally sends SpongeBob into a demolition derby. This isn't just negligence. This is straight up premeditated attempted murder. She knew exactly what she was doing. In another episode, Due in Time, she openly says she'll make sure SpongeBob never drives again, then launches him into the air at full speed. If this happened in real life, she'd be looking at least 25 years per attempt. And considering she's tried this multiple times, we're adding another 50 years to her sentence. Here's where things get really sketchy. Did you know Mrs. Puff has a secret past? This lady has literally changed her identity before. In No Free Rides, she forges SpongeBob's license just to get rid of him. That's not just shady, that's identity fraud. And in another episode, she even hints that she's had to start over before, which means this isn't the first time she's changed her identity. Identity fraud is a felony that carries up to 10 years per offense. And since we have at least 2 major instances of her doing this, we're slapping on another 20 years to her sentence. Now, let's talk about prison escapes. Because yes, Mrs. Puff has broken out of jail before, and not just once, multiple times. In Doing Time, we literally see her escape from prison by running through the sewers. That's a full-on prison break. If you think that's a small crime, think again. In the real world, prison escape can get you 5 to 15 years per offense. And since she's done this at least twice, that's another 30 years added to her sentence. Okay, this next one is actually wild. Mrs. Puff has been caught bribing officials and abusing her power multiple times. Remember in No Free Rides, when she literally fakes SpongeBob's boating exam and hands him a license illegally just to get rid of him? That's textbook bribery. In the real world, bribery is a major felony that carries 10 to 15 years per offense. Since we know she's done this at least once, let's add 15 more years to her sentence. Alright, now let's add this all up. Reckless endangerment is 100 years. Attempted murder is 50 years. Identity fraud is 20 years. Escapes is 30 years. Bribery and corruption is 15 years. The final sentence is 215 years in prison. But what if I told you there's someone in Bikini Bottom who might deserve even more time? This little guy has been committing crimes non-stop for years, and when we finally break down his sentence, it's gonna be wild. Stay tuned, because that video is coming soon. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss what's next.